So as a side note for those who've joined, I know the Nigerian election was quite tumultuous recently, but we've heard some very good rhetoric coming out of the new government and departments with respect to crypto. So, keep in mind that you can share your thoughts or ask us any questions for the panelists, which they'll answer at the end, either in the chat box or using the Q&A tool that I'm sure you guys are very, very familiar with. So if you've just joined, welcome to our webinar series with Lisk. We'll be kicking off in the next 3 minutes or so, just letting the last few people join. It's great to see some familiar names as well. These are the benefits of having a thriving ecosystem. So we're really, really glad to see you. Who knows, maybe some Lisk startups will be, or more Lisk startups, will be coming through one of our programs soon, inspired by today's webinar. So like we said, if you've just joined, we'll be kicking off in the next 2 to 3 minutes. Really, really excited. I mean, we've got an all-star panel joining us today, both sort of some of the big global team out of Lisk, but also African entrepreneurs building right here in Nigeria on the ground. So some really great content lined up for today, and we should be kicking off in the next minute or so. So if you do need to run to the loo quickly, add an extra teaspoon of sugar to that coffee, you've got about a minute to do that. And there we go. I can see the last few latecomers streaming in. Remember, knowledge is a resource that when you share, you don't get any less. So, while you're here, whether you're joining from your PC, whether you're joining from Twitter, you can go to either the Lisk social pages, or you can go to the CV Labs social pages, which I hope all of you are already following. And you'll see that we're streaming live on those pages as well. So you can go there, maybe add a thought from yourself, let people know that you're live in the room, and share that across your socials. Great. We're going to give it another 30 seconds, and then we'll be kicking off, which is just enough time for you to log into LinkedIn or Twitter and make sure that you retweet and share. Great. And I think we are about ready to begin. So I want to welcome you to today's webinar, where first and foremost, we really appreciate you taking the time out to come and join us. We're sure that you are really, really going to enjoy this, leave with some lasting insights. And like I said, who knows, maybe the next cohort we see a startup that was inspired from today. So before we hand over to who everyone really came to see today, the team and the founders building on Lisk, a lot of you will be familiar with us. If this is the first time you're interacting with our ecosystem, we are CVVC and CV Labs. So we build ecosystems, Web3 based ecosystems, but we're also an early stage investor. So we've got a VC fund as well as an accelerator that's run out of Switzerland. As you can see, we've done quite a bit of good work in Africa. And sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Brenton. Hopefully, a lot of you are familiar with me by now. And I'm a principal here at CVVC Africa. And we just wanted to take 2 minutes before we dive into today's content to first wish our startups that just graduated from the recent batch of our accelerator a huge congratulations. So a big shout out to Web3 Sanctuary, who are training developers on the African continent. So if you're a budding Web2 developer who wants to get into Web3, check out Web3 Sanctuary. And our other African startup out of Nigeria, and that's Ivory Pay, bringing online and offline crypto payments to the African continent. And finally, you're going to find, if you want to know what's happening within the African blockchain ecosystem, this annual report that we do with the biggest bank in Africa is definitely the place to go. And if we take a look at just some of that data, that shows us why we should be so interested in this region of Nigeria. For those of you who don't already know, we can see that in 2021 and 2022, Nigeria, out of the entire African continent, accounted for the highest number of blockchain deals. But if we even expand that wider, the highest number of startup deals overall. So by and large, where we expect the next unicorn to come out of in Africa is probably going to be a Nigerian unicorn. And like I said, you never know, the idea could be sparked today. So with that, I'm going to end with a Sotho saying here in South Africa called Kenako, which means the time is now, which we truly, truly believe. And with that, I am going to hand over to the people we have all been waiting to hear today. And that starts off with Dominic from the Lisk team. So Dom, I'll hand over to you to share a bit more.
Great. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Brenton. It's really wonderful to be here again with you guys and to be speaking about a topic that I think everybody here is clearly interested in, and that is regarding blockchain adoption in Nigeria and how Nigeria has already been for years and continues to be one of the guiding lights in Africa for adoption across many verticals and use cases. And I just think it's something that we can all learn from. And it's really interesting to learn more what's going on the ground there. So today we have, as Brenton mentioned, a great set of panelists, co-speakers here with me today. I'd like to welcome you guys all to turn on your cameras, please, so everybody can see you. So we have Ikemefuna, who's one of our front-end developers here at Lisk. He is based in Abuja and has been a long time blockchain advocate. We also have with us today Mutembe, who is, many of you may know him from the CVVC ecosystem. He is the co-founder and CEO of FastTagger out of Nairobi, but he's also done some work over the years in Nigeria, especially with the startup ecosystem, and also really interestingly brings the perspective of, kind of what can other countries, what can other startups building blockchain tech in Africa learn from what's happening in Nigeria. And finally, we have Joshua, who is an artist, a founder from Port Harcourt in Nigeria. And you're the first artist to create music on an NFT, correct, in Nigeria?
Yes, that's very correct. To sell music as NFTs.
Yeah, to sell music as NFTs. So cool. So I mean, we couldn't be. I didn't say my position. I'm the head of BD and partnerships at Lisk here. We're partners with CV Labs. A lot of collaborations. And so happy to be here. Happy to have this discussion. Just to give everybody a sense of an agenda, kind of what we're going to talk about today, or kind of how it's going to be structured. So in a moment, I'm going to there's kind of 3 companies represented on the panel today. There's obviously Lisk, there's FastTagger, and there's Streamliver from Joshua. So I'll give each of us a time to just do a brief introduction on our companies. And then the majority of today will actually be spent just kind of speaking about various topics around adoption of blockchain technology in Nigeria. So that'll be the kind of the meat of today's webinar. And then at the end, as Brenton mentioned, we're looking forward to take some questions from you guys directly. Yeah, and I see there's over 150 people here already, so that's really cool. So let's start with these introductions. Maybe we can start with Mutembe and FastTagger. Maybe if you can give us a short presentation about FastTagger.
Share my screen really quick and share a bit about FastTagger and what we are doing. So 1 second. So I hope you can all see my screen. So as Dominic mentioned, my name is Tembe Kariuki, co-founder of FastTagger. We were one of the startups that was lucky enough to be part of the CV Labs. We were actually the first Kenyan startup. So really, really grateful for the support that CV Labs has given to African Web3 and blockchain startups. So FastTagger essentially is bringing customer intelligence and engagement to decentralized mobile fast retail. And that's one way of onboarding the next billion onto Web3. So we focus really on utility. What is it that's happening on the continent that are challenges for commerce on the continent, and really businesses finding out how to grow? And the opportunity we really saw within that is one very interesting opportunity, is that Africa accounts for about 71% of the world's $1.2 trillion mobile money. That's $1.2 trillion was what happened last year in terms of mobile money globally. And Africa was accounting for about 800 billion of that. And we have about 100 million SMEs and micro SMEs on the African continent. And a lot of these businesses are actually using data from mobile money and trying to use that data to understand their customers better and engage their customers. So when we saw that a lot of these SMEs are struggling with sales and access to finance, so how can we leverage blockchain and AI to really understand all those transactions that are happening and build a platform that is able to work with these SMEs? This is a typical Instagram, social commerce company here in Nairobi. There are many of them in Lagos as well. I remember when I was in Lagos, one of the first events I attended was a social media week where most of the people who were selling there were on Instagram. And then this is also another image of, what a typical market you could find in Lagos or Nairobi. And so we settled down on a solution. So FastTagger has set up an AI-powered upselling and loyalty platform that provides discount tokens powered by the blockchain, where now businesses will be able to analyze the data they have and onboard their users, answer queries and upsell products, and optimizing the logistics. And then customers, across the continent, everybody's looking for an offer. Everyone's looking to be rewarded by their client. And so, it's a simple business model where we charge for data analytics, coupon creation, and the customer discovery from the consumer app. A simple example is here where we're able to automatically generate customer intelligence reports for the business to know who their top customers are, how their behavior is, when it is that they're usually coming, their habits. And then you have, AI-driven automated upselling and loyalty messaging going out to the customers to keep them more engaged, to reward them, and to also upsell different products based on understanding of customers. And then they can now be able to come back and redeem those. And, we have been very lucky to be supported by CBBC. We are partnering with the Kenya Private Sector Alliance and with also the government and NVIDIA for our AI side. And we also selected as the winners of Democratizing AI Award in Berlin in 2020. And so a strong team of individuals with AI backgrounds from MIT and also business analytics backgrounds from Spain, and myself also from working with the German Development Corporation, which actually is what really got me to work within the Nigerian ecosystem with the CC Hub and others, and understand the African ecosystem. So thanks, and that's just a bit about FastTagger, and I look forward to sharing more during the webinar.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mutembe. I think you're one of the rising stars in the African startup scene, so great to have you on board with us today. Next, let's Joshua, if you give us a brief intro to Streamliver, please.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. So screen. All right. So yeah, my name is Joshua Ehizibwe, music artist, also known as Mojizi, also into the blockchain and AI space. I'm building a startup called Streamliver. Streamliver is a Web3 live streaming platform that utilizes NFTs and cryptocurrencies to link creators and fans together and reward users too, also rewarding creators. So with Streamliver, you can earn currency, cryptocurrency from live streaming content. You can mint live stream NFTs and connect with a vast community. So we know that the problem with the creator economy so far is that creators do not have a direct relationship with fans. And so the middlemen, which are the distributors, take large chunk of whatever comes to the creators. So I want to tell the story. As an artist, I released a project sometime in 2021 that gathered over 50,000 streams. And it took me about 3 months to check my royalties, and I discovered a few dollars in my wallet. And so that motivated me to come up with this idea to help creators earn more and connect more with their fans. Okay, so having known that, we know that our mission is to connect creators to the world, fostering a healthy and decentralized art economy. Creators struggle with content monetization, like I said. We know that 40% of live video content creators do not know how to earn from their live stream. And we know that 30% creators feel already existing solutions do not solve it. I'm talking of the likes of them Twitch, them YouTube, and the rest of them, right? We only have a very little percentage of them that know how to earn from this platform and actually do earn tangible income from them. Okay, so why we build is because demand for live streaming and video content in the gaming, entertainment, and the broadcast sectors are increasing. Okay, so we know that video rules the internet currently. And we know that as of 2021, 23% of the global internet traffic was video content, right? So by now, 2023, it must have even doubled, because we know that every marketing campaign utilizes video. And then people would like to share their experiences and their life on camera. That is why we are bringing. What makes us unique is that we bring the live stream to earn model and the live stream NFTs model. That means for every experience, right, it can be converted to money for creators. Yeah. Now we hope and we plan to be the YouTube and the Twitch of Web3, having gathered a lot of enthusiasts in our network, right? As we build, we are gathering a lot of users and gathering a lot of enthusiasts, creators in our network. So we hope to be the YouTube and Twitch of Web3. We have our token, Streamliver token, which has, we are minting over 200 million in our tokenomics, 200 million STVR tokens. Our current metrics is we currently have 500 active community members on our channels who are active. We have 300 plus waitlist signups, and we have a few thousands of people based on speculative data that have heard and want to engage with our product. We are currently on the MVP stage, and we have our major partner, which is Lisk. We also have some advisors who are renowned in the blockchain space, talking of Franklin Peters of Boundless Pay, who was the former vice president of Blockchain Association of Nigeria. We have Anointing Aha, who is the regional manager for L Bank. And we have Mintiplex, who is an NFT launchpad, doing over 10,000 community members in Nigeria. Our team, we are a team actually 8 people, but these are major persons that hold specific roles in the team. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Joshua. And obviously, we're big fans of what you're doing. And also, I just think it's really valuable to have you here on this call, just because, again, I think a lot of talk today will go around, payments and infrastructure topics. And so to have somebody who's, very engaged in the artistic space, NFT space within Nigeria, I think is, just super valuable to have on this call. So I will give a quick intro to Lisk, just for those who don't know, and then I'll have Ikemefuna jump on at the end. And if you have anything to add, Ikemefuna, you can do that then. While I'm pulling up my presentation, just quick reminder that we have a Q&A section, right? So if anybody is interested to ask a question, please, you can already start asking them now. You can do it later, but just a reminder that is happening. Okay, let me wait, sorry, wrong screen. Okay, so again, so for those who don't know about Lisk, we're a layer 1 protocol founded in 2016. What makes us different than all the other layer 1s out there? There's a number of things. So we're focused on accessibility. The founder's mission was to create a blockchain protocol that could be used really by anyone, anywhere. And so we focused on and continue to focus on developing the best SDK for JavaScript in the industry to allow people, all the JavaScript developers that are out there in the world to use our platform and to start experimenting, building blockchain products. We have a team of about 80 people around the globe. Again, definitely focused on developing the SDK. I think some of the other interesting reasons why we're on this call today, why it's interesting for you guys, is that, again, there's a few things. So one is that one of the things that we think about now is that, you see a lot of the adoption in blockchain, a lot of the hype around blockchain being around, NFTs or community building, fintech applications. A lot of the bigger layer 1s are going after, real business use cases, which is very interesting. And we do that as well. But we think that one of the pieces that's been kind of missed here over the last year or 2 or 3, which is also why we started Lisk, was that, the real use for decentralized systems, basically being a blockchain in the ethos of Bitcoin, right? Where the power of blockchain to build decentralized systems to allow for the cutting out of these middlemen, of these industries, of these governments, and things like that. I just, for people to be able to, whether that's from a financial standpoint or from a voting standpoint or from, building infrastructure, from housing, as we'll talk about later, we just think that there's that's still something that's not being talked about so much, but what we're so excited about is how much that's being talked about in Africa. And so, we're making a big effort to kind of be more involved there because we think that there's really this kind of alignment between what we stand for and the types of use cases that are being built. So we build a kind of industry-leading SDK for JavaScript. We also allow you to build your own blockchain. So instead of being smart contract focused, we're more focused on app-specific sidechains, a little bit like the Cosmos model, if you're familiar with that. There's many benefits to that, and we think that over time, the industry will move more and more in that direction, kind of layer 2s and building on your own blockchain, just because you're fully customizable, right? You're not limited by the smart contract restraints. You can, you're not, or transaction throughput, you don't have all these, or many of the challenges that you face when you build a smart contract. Again, as I mentioned, we have a large community all around the globe, and are looking forward to kind of building up much more of a presence in Africa in the next year or so. So happy to be here. And as Joshua is a good representative, we have our application platform is being launched actually in about a month or 2 later this, August, September. And that'll allow, it's a bit like the Cosmos Hub, if you know that, it's allow for interoperability between all the different blockchains being built on Lisk. So we're really excited about that. We already have a number of like a burgeoning, project ecosystem being developed, and we have this really great accelerator program where we can provide hands-on support much more so than many of the other layer ones. So if you're interested in that, please get in touch, let us know, and we'd be happy to hear you. So Ikemefuna, maybe you can jump on really quickly with me and just introduce yourself a little bit more. And if I missed anything about Lisk you want to share, please share.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ikemefuna Obioha. I'm a front-end software developer with Lisk. Been at the company for about 2 years. I live in Abuja, Nigeria, so I'm part of the global team for Lisk. I think we have over 30 nationalities at the company. Most of what Dominic has said covers it in terms of what Lisk aims to accomplish and the technology we use. So I'm just here to kind of contribute a bit as to how much Lisk is going to, what they are currently achieving, right? In terms of the expansion efforts to Nigeria and, why Nigeria in the entire conversation. So I'm, pleased to have everyone here and can't wait to share.
No, and it's great to have you here too, because I know you have extensive knowledge kind of on some of the background of the industry in Nigeria. And so I think that'll be a great addition. So without further ado, let's jump into that, into the topic. So last time I heard we are over 400 streaming. So that's great audience. Welcome everybody in. Wonderful to have you. So we'll be having now a discussion just about blockchain adoption in Nigeria with all our panelists and speakers today. So, just again, Brenton kind of mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but we know that for years, Nigeria has been one of the leading areas for blockchain adoption in the world, really, and specifically in Africa. Brenton alluded to this a little bit, but I know another statistic that I can throw out there is that about a third of all VC funding into businesses that use blockchain over the last year and a half or so has been to Nigerian companies. We know that the government in Nigeria was one of the first governments now to, trial a CBDC. So there's a lot happening, right? There's a lot happening in Nigeria, and there's also, there's regulatory unclarity. Brenton also mentioned this, the new government who's brought in, we've heard, is a little bit more open to blockchain. So it's just this fascinating, cauldron of activity and innovation and necessity for this technology. And so let's start here. I'd like to start with just painting the picture a little bit more of kind of how we've got here, right? How does Nigeria get to this place as one of the leading places for blockchain adoption in Africa and the world? Maybe Ikemefuna, you can start for us. Anything from your mind? I know payments has been a big thing. That was one of the main topics that got this off the ground initially.
Yeah, definitely. Payments has been one of the biggest things. So we have to, there are other things. So we could start off with payments, right? Payments, or, let's go with the term remittances. Remittances have been such a huge deal, like in the world as a whole, right? Apparently, a study done between 1990 and 2003 for low to middle income countries, it turns out that remittances have actually exceeded both official development aid and even foreign direct investments, which shows you how much of a huge deal it is, right? These remittances are mostly coming from like migrant workers in other countries trying to send money home for one purpose or the other, right? So, if we go back as far as 2019, maybe, we would see that, say 2020 to bring it closer, right? Nigeria received as much as $23.8 billion of, remittances, right? Which this is based on like a World Bank report. So these reports coming from like well-trusted sources, right? Being numbers we can rely on. So this 23.8 billion counted was as much as 50%, right, of the remittances received in sub-Saharan Africa in 2019. And, those are such huge numbers. But further on, we saw, along with like the global pandemic, we saw like a 1.5% drop in these numbers, right? Remittance numbers. So from such numbers, the global remittance numbers we went on to see $781 billion received in 2021 and about 794 in 2022. And for such huge numbers, we have these remittances play a huge role. Actually, countries like South Sudan, where remittances pillage ended up being about 34% of the GDP, which is such a huge number. So we could see like around Africa, these remittances have ended up being a huge part of the economy. In addition to this, Nigeria's numbers have been quite interesting in all of this, right? They have increased from about 2021, I think 19 or $20 billion, right? So about $21 billion in 2022, right? Second only to Egypt in 2022, which had $32 billion in remittances. The most interesting part about remittances is that there's a chance that it could be as much as 50% higher than the official numbers, right? And for good reason. Sometimes people are using unofficial channels. And then in cases of countries that have certain challenges with foreign exchange or multiple foreign exchanges, right? People are using some unofficial channels to, send in these remittances, and therefore, might affect the numbers we see. But the most interesting part about these remittances is the cost, right? Because there's a cost incurred from, in sending remittances from one country to another, or, some cases one continent to another. In a study done by the IMF, turns out that on a like $200 remittance amount, it's costing as much as, like for Africa, transferring to Africa, it costs as much as 8 to 9% of the amount, right? In most other places are about 6.8%. And in all of this, the Sustainable Development Goals was to have the cost of remittances be at about 3% of the amount, right? And this is quite key because it's these costs that are kind of, would you say, discouraging or making it harder, right, for these remittances to be made. And even in terms of sending remittances across Africa, right? Send across from South Africa to Zimbabwe, we've seen as high as 18% of these costs, right? It could be via the banks directly or the international money transfer organizations. But as a whole, remittances are coming at a huge cost. So the question becomes, how does blockchain technology help in solving this remittance problem, right? Over time, we've seen a rise in that, leading to even companies like Gray Finance, Bitcoins, or Helicarrier, who were previously known as Bitcoins, to throw your hat in order to solve this problem. Aside the huge problem of remittances, we've seen the other way around, people using, part of the crypto adoption, right? People with suppliers, companies that have suppliers in, could be the US, could be as far as China, right? Use blockchain technology or, crypto to kind of, thanks to challenges with foreign exchange, right? To try to purchase goods and services and pay their suppliers, right? And all of these things have shown how traditional barriers to things like trade, remittances, and other major uses of, crypto and blockchain technology. We've seen, or rather, traditional barriers to trade, all of those things. We've seen how crypto and blockchain technology is breaking down these barriers and reducing costs, right? Costs that, say the end users, some other parties will have had to incur, right? Reducing those costs now end up benefiting everybody in the entire chain. So it's important to see, when you consider these numbers, right? The importance of remittances as a whole, the importance of trade, we can see how much crypto and blockchain technology is really aiding all of this. And it's a welcome development, right? So we could go on to describing, we could go into more details, but I feel like Dominic has something to say.
No, I just want to get in some other, panelists here, because that's a great intro to, the problem around, international payments for a number of topics. And I think maybe Mutembe, do you have anything you'd like to add here? I mean, from your perspective?
Yes, just adding on to that, I think anything that happens in Nigeria ends up affecting the whole continent. As the largest economy on the continent, Nigeria, Nigeria's pulse ends up connecting with the rest of the continent. So you can see recently, when the Nigerian central bank was thinking around the central bank digital currencies, that's when other banks, such as in Kenya, the Central Bank of Kenya, also started thinking about or coming up with a paper on what the Kenya would think of doing in that particular direction. If you look at now that the new government has come up with a blockchain policy of turning Nigeria into a blockchain based also economy, with the new regulations that were approved by the Information and Communication Ministry, you can see similarly a lot of other countries are also now starting to invite blockchain companies. Kenya is also doing the same now, setting up a lot of centers. And previously, when I was working with the German Development Corporation and being in Lagos and seeing the amount of innovation that was happening every other day, challenges with currency and trade. So inter-Africa trade is still quite expensive, right? Mobile money interoperability across the continent. You have a few companies which are doing it, but then now that's when you have the blockchain being able to solve some of those challenges. Obiora just also mentioned the idea about remittances, even with businesses within the continent. So the interesting thing is, when the Nigerian central bank, banned or really took a hard stance towards crypto in around 2001, what happened actually is that it actually ended up increasing activity in peer-to-peer crypto in countries such as Kenya, because of mobile money, has a lot of on-ramping and off-ramping opportunities. So you'd have actually people go onto the exchange platforms, get some of the stable coins sent to a partner here in Kenya, then they exchange that for dollars and then send back. So you had a lot of that now starting to happen. So interestingly, the tough regulations that happened at that point of time ended up increasing activity in blockchain in countries such as Kenya. And so that was also quite interesting. And going back also to what we were talking about NFTs previously, right? Again, Nigeria, this is around 2020, was one of the first countries for someone to sell NFT art for $75,000, $80,000. And I think when people saw that, and Nigeria is the actually now become a global leader in terms of culture and music, right? And so when you see that happening, of course, the rest of Africa also starts following with that. And now you also have more digital artists and musicians in places such as Kenya also starting to follow Nigeria's lead on that side.
Yeah, and that's actually a beautiful segue. I mean, you kind of made it for me. So in terms of, we talked a little bit about the remittance payments, kind of how, again, you're seeing inspiration kind of coming out of Nigeria and people taking what's happening in Nigeria as kind of something to follow or to build upon, to learn from. And the last topic I'd like to cover here, just as a kind of intro to what's happening in Nigeria, is Joshua's aspect, which you just kind of alluded to in terms of that Nigeria has become such a large cultural player in the world, especially from the music and arts side. And so Joshua, yeah, I mean, from your standpoint, kind of what's happening on the ground for you? Why do you think, NFTs and the artistic scene around blockchain is really kind of starting to take off as it is?
Yeah, so we know that Nigerians are actually very resilient people, and anywhere the money is, you find Nigerians. So when the NFT bubble really kicked off in 2020, 2021, 2022, we saw a lot of musicians, a lot of artists, painters, visual artists, go into knowing what NFTs are and how they can sell their art using NFTs. And at that point in time, I was heavy into research. I told a story when I was presenting Streamliver on how I wanted to actually sell my music. And that was how I got into learn about NFTs. And then I used OpenSea at that time to sell one of my songs, right, with some utilities attached to it. Also a couple number of artists, I mean mainstream artists by name Benson, Buju Benson. He released a collection of his head, Buju heads, right, NFT on his Instagram profile, and we saw a lot of engagement on it, right? So even sometime in March, there was this conference organized called South Media Week, right? So they invited I and one other person to come talk and teach more creators about NFTs and how they can utilize NFTs for their music and for their art. So there's a lot of education going background here in Nigeria, even for artists. Even as I speak to you, I have a friend, JB. JB runs a blockchain academy, which he recently partnered with the Commissioner of Education in Lagos State, right? So the Ministry of Education in Lagos State has signed a partnership with a blockchain academy to teach blockchain in secondary schools, in in high schools, and even as much as universities. There are campus hubs for students learning about blockchain and NFTs. And also, I am a LISC ambassador. So it's also part of what we do to teach people about blockchain, partner with campus hubs and activations and all that stuff. So the major thing, even if we have a lot of payments and remittances and all that going on, but the key thing, which is the education and the creative part of blockchain, is really happening background in Nigeria currently. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think I think you might have mentioned it now, but I know you had spoken to me too before about like there being boot camps for artists and things like that. So yeah, it's incredible to see that it's being, adopted on so many different levels, right? You have not just the artistic community, not just people needing to bring in money, not even just the government like experimenting, but you also have like the artistic community embracing it. You have people learning it really early on in schools already. So again, to me, it's just super, super interesting. So let's kind of pivot to that now in terms of, we're getting already now a sense of kind of what's going on today. And I know there's a number of other topics. But I really liked what Mutembe kind of mentioned, in the sense that, from his perspective, he sees that, other countries on the continent, other governments, maybe other startups are kind of looking at Nigeria and seeing what's happening there and kind of and learning from it and seeing what they can take from it. So I want to focus on that a little bit, because I think that's a lot of value to maybe the people who are listening, in terms of kind of what are some of the interesting things that are being worked on in the Nigerian ecosystem at the moment that people around Africa or even around the world can really look at in terms of, inspiration, watching them as trials, seeing how they get adopted. And yeah, this can be a kind of an open discussion. Maybe I'll start with you, Mutembe, since you were the one who brought it up.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. So one of the interesting things that happens, Nigeria happens to be the most populous country on the African continent, and also in a lot of senses like the most vibrant economy with the things that are happening there. And so one of the interesting things about that is when we talk about identity. How do you take a country of 200 million plus people, and how do you get to give good digital identity, and that's one of the areas within blockchain and Web3 that is really a big focus, right? So that you can allow people financial access. And so the Central Bank of Nigeria did something interesting with coming up with the BVN, right? So which is like a bank verification number that essentially gives every Nigerian who has an account like an identity. And I think this is one of the interesting things that also other African countries can look at and see how do you build something within the blockchain that is also quite similar. And then now with also the conversation, I think in Nigeria with the NIN, with the national identity. And so how the national identity number, and how do you, bring these two things together to give people, a digital identity that will give them access to different services. And similarly, you see other countries now starting to look at this and how you can actually also use, the blockchain and Web3 in this particular area. And then that also now, we're talking about, identity, and we're talking also about, verifying, being able to verify things. Then now we move towards things such as housing, right? So, there's a very good also CV Labs backed company called House Africa, which is solving like a problem that the entire continent has, right? You have had a lot of, challenges with the land registration across the continent, verifying that. And so House Africa is one of the companies that's actually doing that in Nigeria, and has, it's more or less like a leapfrogging, right? From paper-based and to, simple IT systems to now actually being able to verify, a plot of land from a developer that this is actually, the history of that particular piece of land. In Kenya, that could be, is definitely something that could be borrowed, because, recently also with our government, there was a court case where the Supreme Court, said that, hey, you as the buyer are the one who's supposed to verify the history of that particular piece of land. And so Nigeria is already a leader in that, with companies such as House Africa, in verifying, documents, official documents, and what can be done with those particular documents. So I see that as, two interesting examples of identity verification of documents of property, and also of financial inclusion that will start being adopted on the rest of the continent.
I have a question on that. So in terms of, because I think, identity, I also think, that's one of the kind of, if you want to call it killer use case, I just think that could make such a difference for, humanity, if we were able to get people's identity onto a public record. So the one you mentioned, the BVN and the NIN, those are not on the blockchain system right now, correct? It's just that the idea of doing that could be transposed onto a blockchain. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are conversations which are happening, right? Because as the Nigerian government is now has a policy and a regulation that is thinking of the new president is actually thinking about making Nigeria a good use case and crown about what blockchain technology can be. And so as people are having conversations about the next generation of the BVN and the NIN, this is conversations that are going on in the ecosystem of how also like the blockchain could be used that in that particular.
That actually answers my next question, because I was going to ask, is there an openness, do you think, in the government in Nigeria or in elsewhere where you've seen it in Africa, just to potentially putting in a system like that onto a blockchain? So if there's conversations already ongoing, I know you don't have the definitive answer, but that's reassuring as a starting spot.
Yeah, I think definitely there are those conversations going on, and a lot of people, there's usually pushback sometimes because blockchain just creates a lot of transparency, and some people don't want a lot of transparency, and that's across the continent. But that also gives the most promise on the continent, because one of the biggest challenges that we're always struggling with is lack of transparency and corruption. And so this could be very good solutions to increasing transparency and increasing integrity and accountability to governments.
Amazing. I want to, Kumufuna, if you want to jump on here. So one thing, because I thought it was really interesting, because I know that in a conversation I had with Kumufuna a few days ago, he was kind of mentioning that he thought that now with like the eNaira test, that Nigeria could actually learn something from Kenya. So Mutembe, you may need to stay on, we'll see. But if you want to talk a little bit about just the eNaira in general, kind of what other countries can learn from that, because I know it hasn't gone so well so far. And then maybe, some cross-pollination here between Kenya and Nigeria, that would be interesting.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. So the eNaira is Nigeria's central bank digital currency, CBDC. Mutembe did mention the Nigerian government taking a hard stance on crypto. This was 2021. But then it's important to trace the backstory of the eNaira, right? It turns out they have been interested in it, right? Blockchain technology as far back as like 2017. Apparently there were internal conversations as well as external consultations as regards that. And, even a sandbox experiment for it. So in line with all of this, as at October 2021, the eNaira was launched, becoming only the second, CBDC in the world, right? Behind the one in the Bahamas, the Sand Dollar, if I'm correct. And that seemed like such a huge shift, right? From seeming aversion to blockchain technology to actually launching a CBDC, right? And that was a very interesting development. It was built with, it runs on a digital currency management system built with, by this software company, Bits Incorporated, who are quite huge on such technologies. It runs on a permission blockchain called the Hyperledger Fabric. So it's different from like a regular blockchain in the sense that you can assign kind of like roles or something, right? To different people, in such a way that then the CBN can now mint these currencies, right? That's the rest of the system is meant to use. So the CBDC, the eNaira, has had some interesting developments ever since, right? Both in terms of like the numbers. After a year, surprisingly, they hadn't had any like major like risk in terms of like maybe cybersecurity events, right? They had about almost 100% uptime, so no major outage, which is quite impressive for, such technology. But what then was interesting was in terms of the numbers. We saw about, I think 919,000 wallet downloads after it was launched. We saw about 802,000 transactions. It turned out that it was weekly, they were having about 45,000 transactions, and felt like the average value of a transaction was about 60,000 naira. So they had seen numbers after a year, but not the level of numbers they had expected, right? They had done, I think as a whole transaction value, they had done over 8 billion naira or so, which I think was $23 million or so at the time. So they had seen usage for it, but then not as expected, right? When you analyze the numbers, it turned out that number of people using the eNaira wallets were only about 1% of the banking population, right? And then it gets more interesting because only less than about maybe 2% of those who had set it up had really used it, right? It seemed like some people had only used this, the eNaira once after they had set up the accounts, right? Which is interesting as a whole, because there were goals behind the launch of the eNaira. It was supposed to facilitate remittances, increase, the informal access to the informal sector in the sense of like expanding the tax base and, being able to keep more track of the, informal economy. Mind you, this informal economy, it's a reasonable chunk of people. We're talking as much as 36% of the population, which is around like 38 million people, right? So the challenge has always been the term, both like the government and the startups use, is about banking the unbanked, right? These people have been doing transactions offline, mostly in cash, right? For some time. And the challenge is how do you now get them, more access to them, right? And, it's an interesting challenge which has been there for a while. So this was one of the goals of the eNaira. So the numbers weren't great. And some of it could be alluded to a bunch of things, right? One of which was, there was a phased approach to the eNaira, right? The first phase was, launching it with people who already had like bank accounts using, had like Mutemi mentioned, both the NIN and the BVN, right? Which recognizes you, in these systems. That was the first phase, but they are supposed to go on to expand to people without bank accounts, right? And then, more onto like people with just, what do you call them, smartphones, right?
Yeah.
And with this, you can now expand access to it. But and in all of this, the eNaira is meant to be tiered, right? Having certain, like your BVN and whatnot would, having certain tiers, which would of course increase the amount of people that, amount of transactions you can do in a day, right? While making this efforts, they had tried to get more merchants to use it, right? Because these things work by network effects, right? Mobile money works because there are merchants that accept mobile money as well as people willing to pay with mobile money, right? So all these moves were supposed to be linked together. If one part was missing, then it would not reach the expected levels. So while, the numbers weren't that great. Some of these things played a role in it. The inability to, the phased approach to it, the mistrust to some extent, right, by the public with such things, some of which could be stemmed back to the hard stance the CBN, right, or the government took on crypto back in 2021, right? And, went as far as, had accounts, blocked and whatnot, right? And this hard stance kind of led to the rise of P2P in both Nigeria and Africa as a whole. So you could see how there'd be that sort of difficulty to go from, these people seem to be against crypto and blockchain technology, and there's now a CBDC, right? Yeah. And then by the time you look more into it, okay, if the plan was to access more people without, more of the informal economy, right, aside the formal economy, how was that going to work with the existing thing? Because it would now require CBN, trying to interact on a retail level, right, which comes with its own challenges. One way that could have been solved was with the use of mobile money, right? Mobile money is still in its, you could say it's still in its infant stages, right? In Nigeria as a whole. I think most of the operators got their license last year. MTN Momo took off late last year. There are some other ones like I think Chams Mobile also. But then it has not hit the strides that it has hit in other African countries, right? The MTN Momo is going quite great in Ghana. M-Pesa is doing amazing things in Kenya, right? So everybody's trying to, until it hits such levels where you can do the easiest of transactions, right? Without interacting with like your mobile apps or something, right? That's when we're going to see such technology. So in a bid to fix that, and of course, there's also issues around enlightening people, right? Sensitization. If you're trying to get more communities to use these things, you need to speak to your traditional leaders to, enlighten people on how much this can help them, right? The same goes with onboarding more merchants into these systems. So now efforts are being made on that front, right? Sensitization of more people and communities around these things, right? Even in terms of if there were, I don't want to use the term palliatives, there were like certain, call them allocations or something, the government could be trying to make to the public, right? Such technologies can be used, something like the INR can be used to make it in order to encourage more people to use such systems. But then it now became important for the central bank to now try to partner with the mobile money operators in order to expand the users, right? Because for regular users, if to go onto a new project or product, right, you want to see utility that you don't have elsewhere, right? So they hadn't seen it at some points with the e-Naira, which kind of, played a role in the numbers, right? By adding more daily utility, which they are now trying to accomplish via like other third parties, right? Who can then build products that, help innovate the e-Naira and, expand its use. Then also collaborating with mobile money operators. Then this way you can then expand the numbers or the target audience for these things, right? And then, by that way, with this expansion, more users, more transactions happen, which then has that, detailed network effect, right? And then, makes the projects then hit, the expectations that were initially set for it. So that's is the current state of e-Naira. More efforts are still being made around it. But like I referenced the impact of like mobile money, right? In my conversation with earlier, my conversation with Dominic, how mobile money, that integration of mobile money, right, can help play a role in the expansion of the technology. So Mutemba is of course from Kenya and quite familiar with like mobile money, right? So he can, speak a bit more.
No, thanks a lot. Obioha, like that's a really, really, really in-depth and comprehensive, view of how, the central bank digital currency, went. And I think one thing that it's showing is that sometimes people don't trust, initiatives which are being pushed by the government, sometimes because, for example, recently in Kenya now, with the new finance bill, they are introducing a 3% tax on all, crypto assets, right? And so that means whether you've made money off of them or not, right? So I think a lot of governments are looking at this as a way to track people and to be able to tax people more. And generally, at least on the African continent, is people are always asking, okay, I'm not really seeing the value of where my taxes are going, so I'm usually hiding from that. And then, you look at even the way mobile money emerged a lot in places such as Kenya. It was mostly because it was people from rural urban areas. You send the young people to the city or other people to the city to make money, and then they send money as remittances back to the village. And actually that's where a lot of the mobile money was being used for. And interestingly, I think Nigeria is your banking system has actually been a bit more advanced than a lot of countries in terms of instant settlements, right? So that has been very interesting, because in other countries we actually haven't had that. So mobile money came in very handy when you could actually do instant settlement, and you could easily now just go and get the money from someone. And I think maybe that's something that has affected. So there needs to be a lot more government, banks and telcos interoperability happening there, because you were way more advanced, and it's only other countries now didn't have that, and that's why they also started implementing mobile money a lot more. I think the on-ramping and off-ramping, like in places like Kenya, is a lot of it is done via USSD, right? And so the central bank digital currency, as you mentioned, was very much focused on like smartphones. And so how would the people who are in the market, how would they be able to use like their USSD phones? They'd have to upgrade to other phones. And so maybe that's also something else that caused a bit of a challenge. But as more and more people are getting more affordable, smartphones, that could also increase the number of people who are able to use it. So I think that's an interesting look at how, the banking infrastructure being really advanced and the banks being really strong in Nigeria could actually be one of the things that, has, slowed down the central bank digital currency, and also that trust factor with the people. And then maybe also not looking at the actual problems that people have, but also just what the government wants to do, which is more transparency of the people. And so if a private company, sometimes like an MTN, was to be doing it, they focus on, okay, what problem are we solving as a company, and is it going to create value for the people? And that's why they're going to use it. Just going by also what you mentioned, Ike, about that it was not really focusing on what the problems of the people were, but rather than the government wanted to have more visibility of the trend that's actually going on. And so I think now that they realize, as you say, that, okay, we have to partner more with, banks and with the telcos, hopefully that will now speed things up a bit more.
And because I think that's one of the fascinating things here, right, is that you have these different layers, right? So you have the government implementing this, and again, to your point, maybe there's concern from users in terms of transparency, in terms of what are they really using it for, in terms of tracking and things like that. At the bottom, you have like kind of this peer-to-peer movement. We're using remittances, and then also within the countries, as we've talked about. And in the middle, you have like the corporates and the startups like yourself, who are kind of trying to build solutions that are kind of fair and work best for solving people's needs. Ikem, did you want to add anything there before we jump to the next topic?
No, not
okay. I just saw you jump back on with the video, so I wasn't sure. No, all good. So I mean, that's super fascinating conversation, guys, there, and also in terms of how again, Africa, people in Kenya can learn from what's happening in Nigeria, and also vice versa, right? So what's happening in Nigeria can look at the mobile payment scene in Kenya that's pretty advanced, and take cues from there and learnings from there. So let's just talk briefly, and again, I mentioned this in the chat, guys, but so we're, just because this conversation is going so well, we're just going to be going over here a little bit, so stay with us. But the other interesting topic that, Metemene kind of brought up, which I know is also kind of, again, a Pan-African topic, and just an interesting use case for blockchain in general, is this topic around, land verification, record verification. So again, I know, Joshua, you had spoken to me a little bit about having some insight there from your own side in terms of kind of how that is on the ground. Just kind of what's your input there from what you've been seeing?
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to cite with two examples here. These are real-world solutions that are solving this problem of land ownership and tokenizing land properties. So I was at a conference this morning, earlier this morning, and one of the speakers who came on is also like a real estate mogul. So he owns this startup, Debola Properties. It's a renowned um, real estate company in Lagos State and in Port Harcourt, housing over 75,000 persons, right? And so he cited that they are they have improved on their technology, right, to use blockchain to tokenize land assets. And even people can be able to like actually view, inspect their landed properties from their mobile devices without having to go there physically. He made mention of implementing blockchain technology, right, to make this happen. I have a friend, his name is Andy. He runs a startup, Rosify, ROESIFY. So ROESIFY also solved the problem of land tokenization, where people be able to invest into landed properties with as little as $1 in platform to buy properties, right? So these entities that these tokens are like real world ownership of the assets in real, right? So these things that they see some bit of government and backwards trying to get things done, licenses and all that. But the fact is that there's a problem, and there are people that are solving the problem. And let's give or take 2 years from now, we'll begin to see that the government will keep improving on their relationship with blockchain. As of last month, early June, when the new government came into power, one of the first things they did was to set up a committee, the committee comprising of the leaders of two verified blockchain associations in Nigeria, talking of stakeholders in Blockchain Association of Nigeria, which I am a member of, and one other association with government delegates. This committee was set up to license and to bring policies and to make sure that the policies guiding blockchain, which also involves tokenization of landed properties, right? All these policies begin to come up favorable for builders and for citizens alike. Yeah.
No, great. And thank you for that color. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to see that people are doing that. I mean, I know that one of the challenges and doing this, and I don't know, Mutembe, if you know the company you were referring to, how they're doing it specifically, but I know one of the challenges is like how to actually, that making that the connection between a real world asset and the on-chain verification that it exists. And I know that's something that people are working on in different ways, and also in terms of NFTs around music and art. But I don't know if you have, if you either of you have any insight there into how these companies are doing that at the moment.
Yeah, I think House Africa is also really the one that I know of, and that they're doing a lot of that, and they're actually working with property developers, particularly, and having them also create NFTs of the different properties and with attributes, and so that you can know, and follow like a track of like the ownership of that particular place. So it's also with the new developments. So that's where I've seen a lot of it. I think the other interesting thing, and Ikem and Joshua can talk more about this, is that in places such as Lagos, trying to get accommodation like a rental property, you usually have to pay a year in advance, or even almost 2 years in some places, because of the landlords and what how the conversations with the landlords. And so that's also could be something that could the blockchain could come in, so that to assure the landlords that there's actually going to be people who are staying there, or if you want to buy a property as well, fractal or tokenizing, so that different people can be able to own a piece of that property. So I think these are two interesting things, like the land ownership and also the house ownership. That's also something that can be worked on. But I would say, definitely check out like House Africa. I think it's called System Map. That's their product. I think that's one of the really, really good use cases on the blockchain that's happening. And also a CV Labs, CVC portfolio company. I'll just put it
100%.
up there.
Yeah, put it in the chat there, something like that. So just before we get to questions then, I mean, I know a few people have brought it up during the conversation, but if there's any kind of final thoughts in terms of kind of, the new government that's come into place, and some of the things that they're doing and kind of, where are we looking to go forward there in terms of, regulation, in terms of, if there's going to change anything from in the remittance markets or any of the other markets or verticals we've been talking about today. I just want to give everybody an opportunity to speak to these recent changes, if they would like.
One thing that's certain is that conversations are being had around these things, right? In the US, there have been very interesting conversations with the SEC as regards, the crypto assets, right? We've seen Europe have certain of these conversations and, try to write bills that define how things would go, right? So Tembe mentioned the 3% taxing of crypto assets in Kenya, right? In Nigeria, the new government hasn't been in for too long, so there wouldn't be far-reaching changes immediately on that front, right? One thing is very certain, on the government end of things, they want transparency, more transparency into people's transactions, right? They could track remittances, but when it seemed there are a lot of crypto transactions, they couldn't keep track of that. And, just like any government, they're trying to, get a picture, more view into, all these sort of transactions. So one could say there are bound to be conversations that will be had on this front, right? It's also wonderful that Joshua mentioned the sort of stakeholders they've tried to sit down with to figure out things, right? Because it's that partnership between the government and the public, or rather the private sector, right, that can aid how some of these discussions will go. Just, coming to terms on what the technology is and what it can bring, right, is what's now going to lead to a proper definition of the regulations around it, right? The SEC in Nigeria too, there's been some mention of, I think they had some regulation, or they had a conversation around what, they're going to do going forward, seeing as there's been a rise, right, both through startups and the companies that have been here for years, in terms of companies in the Web3 space, right? Be it doing investments or remittances or whatever, right? So one key thing that we know is that while the new government hasn't set any fixed regulation, right? And as well, the world as a whole is making these adjustments as blockchain technology becomes more dominant, right? One thing in Nigeria is, we'll have to, wait it out and see, right? Time will tell what these regulations will be like. But conversations, one thing we know is that conversations are being had with stakeholders within the industry to help figure out what direction or these regulations would go in. So Joshua, I feel like you can add something to it.
Yes, yes, very, very apt, bro, very apt. The thing is, in Nigeria currently, there's a lot going back in with the government and with various associations. I think mid-June, we got to hear of this firsthand as people that are involved in this. It's not yet public though, but we got to hear that the government is saying they need 10% on taxes, right, on crypto taxes and all that stuff. So they are back and forth to these things. But the good thing here is that there is something going on. There's a lot of building going on in this space. There's a lot of talks with the government and regulation going on in this space. So we are saying give or take 2 years from now, we'll see a stabilization of these things, and we'll see an uptrend in blockchain adoption, talking of remittances and payment, and in tokenizing properties and real estate, because that is also a thing that is actually on in this. There will be an uptrend with NFT creators, because platforms will be built and more people will be reason jump on these platforms to bring about decentralization, creative, right? So I think that is how far I can go for now. Yeah.
Great. I mean, fantastic answers, guys. Thanks for that. So just a reminder, everybody who's on live with us, we're going to jump to questions now. So if you have a question, please enter it into the Q&A section. And just for transparency's sake, so we're only going to be answering questions that relate to Nigeria today. So if you have a question that was not related to Nigeria, we're going to skip that, unfortunately, today. So the first question is actually right on that topic, more or less. So maybe Joshua and Ikem can jump back on here in terms of their screens. This comes from Nicole, and she says, "Hi guys, not sure if this was covered already, but what's the regulatory status in Nigeria? Has the travel rule, etc., been passed? Are NFTs regulated?" And you can expand on it beyond that if you'd like.
Okay, Inkem, I think I will go on this. So the ban on cryptocurrencies, right? It's not really like I'm trying to get the right words to put. It's not like it is illegal to use cryptocurrencies or to trade cryptocurrencies. Okay, so there was this thing that happened last month, the month of June. A scam project who registered as Binance Nigeria, right? Binance Nigeria Limited, right? Was flagged by the SEC as fraudulent. And there was a lot of field in the space. People were now pulling off their money from Binance. Before Binance now had to clear the air that they are not, the SEC is not banning Binance. It is the other projects that are trying to come up to do a lot of scammy stuff. But the point is that they made it clear that cryptocurrency, the use at your own risk. So it's not like it is illegal. It is not like the government has said anybody that they find trading or doing stuff with blockchain and currencies will be arrested and all that stuff. I mean, the place is really thriving with a lot of blockchain going on, a lot of cryptocurrency going on, even with the government. Like I made mention of it earlier, that the Lagos State Ministry of Education, right, recently partnered with a blockchain company that are teaching blockchain in schools. So the government actually promotes innovation. They are trying to put relation to these things, right? So the ban on cryptocurrencies was on the CBN, the Central Bank of Nigeria, not the Central Bank of Nigeria is not going to affiliate or have a thing to do with crypto trading and cryptocurrencies. But the users, or would I call it the citizens, can do it at own risk. That is the right. And with the talks and that are going back and forth with the government, it is looking like it is going to take an upturn or an uptrend soon, with a lot of government support to these things to regulate and to promote it. So I think that is currently what is going on with regulation in this space. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great start to the answer. I hope, Nicole, you're happy with that. Ikem, do you have anything to add to that answer specifically? Guess not. Oh, yeah.
No, I don't.
Okay, cool. No, all good. Okay, so the next question comes in from Kyle. He says, "Good morning from Boston. How can Nigeria provide a positive model for the rest of the continent in the use of digital currencies as we see the evolution of the African continental free trade area?" Mutembe, maybe this is right up your alley.
So that's an interesting question. There's a lot that needs to happen within the Africa continental free trade area. I think blockchains, one, can be able to really reduce the amount of paperwork in terms of customs. That is the regulations within countries. There's a lot of that has been going on. I think at certain point there were certain countries that actually refused to sign the charter, but I think that has been solved right now. So one is, blockchain coming in to reduce the paperwork, smart contracts, speeding up the processes for a lot of the processes, and to standardize a lot of like the documentation that's required. I think because Nigeria is like a huge trade partner for a lot of countries, I think already right now, most of inter-Africa trade is on the rise. So countries are trading more with each other than before. Before it was mostly we were getting things from outside the continent. Kenya, for example, I think Uganda is like our number one. You could see even during the different inaugurations, like for example, the Kenya's inauguration, there was a lot of delegations of business people from Nigeria. Similarly, the same happened, or will happen in Nigeria. So I think one of the big opportunities is one with trade, banks being able to settle, with the different currencies on the continent. Right now, it's usually quite difficult to go to Nigeria with Kenya shillings and try to change Kenya shillings to Naira. You still have to deal with the dollar. So this could be another thing of interoperability with the central bank digital currencies, or with exchanges and allowing people to do with stable coins. That I think is a big opportunity within that. There are now a number of startups, such as like I think Honeycoin here in Kenya, which a lot of people are doing trade in Nigeria itself. People doing trade with other countries using crypto. I think those are the three major areas. Like one, blockchain being used to reduce paperwork and customs and standardize a lot of what needs to happen. Two, actually another thing with identity on the continent. So I think already there are a lot of blocks, like you have ECOWAS, you have here in East Africa Community of coming up with very standardized traveling documents. Right, so that's another area where the blockchain could also be used in terms of ensuring that people can travel between the countries. It's still very expensive to travel on the continent, and need to harmonize airport taxes and such on the continent. And then in terms of moving money, easier right now, even mobile money, there's a lot of challenges with the interoperability. You have companies such as MFS Africa solving part of that, but I think a lot more can be done with the blockchain and allowing that. So those are I think, key areas that the Africa continental free trade area can leverage on blockchain, and with Nigeria's leadership on the continent.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mutembe. Great answer. We did get a question about supply chain. And before we go to that, just a reminder, again, we're really looking for Nigeria specific questions, so I can turn that into a Nigeria specific question if we have time here in a minute. One more question before we get to that one then, though, is again from Nicole. And so for people on the ground in Nigeria, Ikem, Joshua, do most crypto users in Nigeria use exchanges, or are they opting for P2P transfers and exchanges and things like that when they hold the crypto?
Okay, so I'll go first with that. So most people in Nigeria use both. They do crypto exchanges. For example, I do various crypto exchanges, the likes of them Binance, because Binance is like one of the biggest here, if not the biggest currently in Nigeria. The likes of them Binance. I know a lot of people too who are crypto inclined that do DeFi, right? So they use protocols like the Uniswap and PancakeSwap, and even the ones that are built by Nigerians, right? So there's a lot of exchanges being used in Nigeria, and also we are even trade my risk and all that. So crypto exchanges are used very much in Nigeria, and also yeah, people use P2P, P2P exchanges too. Most crypto exchanges also do P2P, so it's kind of like the same thing. Some people even sell each other. For example, I have USDT, you have a lead, can I my USDT to get risk and all that stuff. It happens. There are communities that do that, but we don't advise people to do that because there's no contract or like trust, like systems to hold people accountable. So most people do the P2P crypto exchange, right? And who also use exchanges. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then just to kind of, you have something to add to that, Ikem?
Yeah.
Cool.
I
Go,
totally
go.
agree with that. The P2P is quite a huge deal, right? I think as on platforms like Binance has the largest numbers, right? I think maybe as much as 80% of retail transactions on the continent, right? At some point, as high as 80%. We've seen platforms like Paxful also play a role in the P2P. I think Remitano, if I'm correct. And then just like Joshua was mentioning, like we call them offline. Transactions happen on like WhatsApp and Telegram, right? So as we've had as high as like 55% growth on Paxful numbers in 2022, and as high as like 140% growth on the same platform for Kenya in the same 2022, right? And we're seeing these numbers kind of translate to other places like Ghana, where a lot of Nigerians travel to. So definitely, of course, while the DeFi numbers are just going up, right? The traditional exchanges, right? Binance being the largest, we have companies like Luno too. I can't remember some of the other major ones that come to mind, but definitely more of exchanges, right? And then peer-to-peer. The peer-to-peer numbers went up heavily from 2021, right? Else, we already had like local companies like even buy coins. That's where people were already using for these things. So a combination of exchanges, more numbers on exchanges, who also have their own P2P services, right? And then other services like P2P, more P2P aligned services like Paxful and Remitano.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for adding that in too. Okay, so I think we've gone about half an hour over now, so I'm going to wrap it up. I'm sorry to the person who asked about supply chain logistics. I mean, I don't know that we would have been the right panel or right speaker set to answer that really in depth, anyways. About the the intricacies of how blockchain can support supply chain. But thank you for the questions, everybody. Thank you all for being on. This was a really pleasure. I mean, I would love to do this more often just because I think it's such a valuable thing to, create this knowledge sharing of people who have different experience on the ground. I mean, I know from us at Lisk, again, as I kind of mentioned in the intro, we're super excited to get more involved in Nigeria. As you see, we're already starting to be involved and get more involved in Nigeria and across Africa just in general, just because, again, I mean, again, when you look at it, adoption in other parts of the world, so far it's been really very heavily based on, market fluctuations. When it's a bull market, everybody wants to be in crypto. Everybody's wanting to build something on NFT. Everybody wants to build a DApp. And then the bear market, it's like, what are we using this technology for again? So point being that, I think we all see that there's some real use cases for this technology that can solve people's problems in Africa, and exploring that more is fascinating. Where it leads us, as we talked about, there's kind of all these layers happening in Nigeria as kind of like a spotlight of the entire African ecosystem in terms of peer-to-peer, company corporates, and then the government level, all trying to figure out what's the best way to incorporate, what can we do to, solve problems. So again, super fascinating. Thank you to all of you for jumping on. Thank you to the panelists and speakers. Thank you to Brenton and Gideon for having us today. If you want to learn more about any of us, welcome to follow us on social media, on LinkedIn. And if you're interested, if you're a starter wanting to build something with Lisk, please check our website. And I know CV Labs also has something for startups. So we're all here to support you guys. And yeah, appreciate it. So long.